Well, thank you, Bernie, for answering these questions about your association with Port Talbot Harriers. When did you actually start running?
I've always done sports for all my life, mainly always football, but when I went to the grammar school in Liverpool, they had a cross-country team, and I was encouraged by my form teacher to get involved. And that was the first serious running I did when I was 11. I was reasonably good, which I enjoyed, as you do when you're a child. But unfortunately, after one term, he left, and the Saturday morning cross-country team that he was running stopped instantly. I think it started again later on, but by that time I decided to go back to playing football on Saturday mornings, and I never did get back involved in cross-country until Alan Perkins twisted my arm a substantial time later.
Okay, did you compete at school, and what was your main event then?
Other than the cross-country, I can't remember running for the school. I played football for the school all the time, but we used to have a sports day, so to speak, in the summer. And as only recently I was thinking about this, I used to win the 1500 metres, which is a bit short distance for me. I don't normally run that short an event. But I used to run it wouldn't have been 1500 metres, it would have been a mile in those days. It would have been 4 laps of the track. And I seem to have every year an unusual system of basically sprinting the first 400 metres, getting way ahead of everybody else and hanging on for dear life. And my recollection, I think I won it every year, if only by a hair's breadth at the end. I think the fear of everyone chasing me down seemed to get me to the line. So I suppose that was my earliest success at the sport.
Okay, what year did you first join Port Talbot Harriers, and what were your earliest memories of the club?
I joined in 2008. I remember it quite clearly. I was training for the London Marathon. I was doing it regularly then. And we have an area called the Speedwork area just on the way towards the hospital here. I would just happen to be running around that space when a stalwart of the club, Alan Perkins, happened to come along and say, "Who are you and what are you doing, and would you fancy joining Port Talbot Harriers?" My immediate response would have been, "Don't be crazy, I'm 53, 54 years of age," which I was at the time. But unfortunately, Alan's a couple of years older than me, so that wasn't the right response. I couldn't say that to him. And as he convinced me that it was a good club to join, as soon as I finished the London Marathon the following Sunday, which was a few days later, I came back and joined the Harriers, and I've been with them ever since.
Who were the main characters you remember from your early days?
I think the main characters were the stalwarts of the club, the guys, mainly the guys who were slightly older than me, but they'd been around for a long time. People like John Davies, Alan Perkins, David Oak, Colin Anthony, people like that were very friendly, very supportive. And although I was quite used to being involved in sport, running was still not really my main activity. I hadn't done that very seriously. In essence, I'd sort of jogged my marathons compared with what I did later on. So the club really got me into running seriously, and there were a lot of people with a lot of experience, and they very kindly shared it with me.
Where and when did you train?
Well, once I joined the club, I got involved with a bunch of the quicker runners, I suppose, who used to go out on Sunday mornings, which has always been my favourite run. And we'd run a minimum of at least 13 miles wherever we went every Sunday morning, because most of us were marathon runners. We'd go everywhere locally, places I'd been living here for 30 years by then or something, but places I'd never discovered before, in the Avon Valley, over towards Swansea, along canals, up the mountains, absolutely fabulous places, across the dunes. So there's a variety of places to run that only sometimes through running you discover.
What was your favourite event and why?
My favourite event has always been the marathon, and particularly the London Marathon. I ran it first of all in 1981 when it was the very first London Marathon. I was still a footballer in those days, and it was a bit of something I'd been interested in, running a marathon, but never took it seriously until the London Marathon was publicised, and I decided to have a go. They had a ballot, and I got in on the first ballot. I think there was 7,000 runners that year, and 6,300 turned up on the day. I trained for it, but only in between my football training. I wasn't training any way like I trained later in life. So I enjoyed that, did it, went back to playing football, and that was it. Until 25 years later, when my daughter, who was she just graduated from university, she was working in London as a solicitor, and said, I fancy doing it, will you do it with me? It was the 25th anniversary of the London Marathon. I thought, why not? If I do it once every 25 years, that would be great, I thought. So I did it with her, ran for the Muscular Dystrophy UK charity, and I've been generally running it every year ever since.
What were your best times, distances in your main events?
I can't compete with the real people in the club because I didn't, well, I would say because, but I didn't start running until much later. I was well into my 50s. And, but I was 53, 54 maybe. I did my best London Marathon in 3 hours, 7 minutes. And I did Llanelli that year, 1 hour, 26, the Llanelli half marathon. So quite pleased with those sorts of times really for my age is the way I tend to think of it. I did get ranked first in Wales in 2015 for the marathon, which is quite pleased with that really.
So when did you become chairman of Port Talbot Harriers?
Oh, well, I got John Davies to blame for that. He approached me in 2012, I think it was, and asked if I'd be prepared to stand as the current chairman. Peter was standing down. And I agreed, and I've been chair ever since. And so I blame him for everything.
Can you tell me how the club has grown in the last 10 years?
Oh, well, it certainly has. The club has been very successful for many, many years. It's obviously over 100 years old now. And for most of that time, it was a relatively small elite club, and it was tremendous. But the world had changed a bit, and we felt that we wanted to be more of an inclusive club. So we started to open it up to the breadth of talent that we've got in the locality. And people wanted to join. People who were not naturally athletes wanted to get involved. And the club just gradually grew and grew and grew. We ran beginners courses, and people stayed, and they enjoyed it, and it was fabulous. We then expanded into multi-sport because that was another popular thing that was happening in the locality. And the club just grew and grew and grew. And so much so that just before the pandemic, we'd gone from something like, I seem to have the number 45 in my mind when I was chair at the start. And we reached 500 members, which in that space of time was absolutely fantastic. The pandemic knocked us back quite a bit, but we're growing back, and I think the latest figure is about 470 in 2022.
Sports shops are bound these days. How and when did you get your kit?
That's a good question. I ran in what I call DAPS in terms of the early running. There used to be a sports shop that Alan Martin, the rugby player, owned in Forge Road in Port Talbot. And just before the first London Marathon, I went in there and bought a pair of running shoes which had sort of foam on the base as well, on the soles, is all I can describe it as. And it did feel a little bit strange running in them, but they were a pair of running shoes. I'd never owned a pair of real running shoes before. The only disadvantage was they had a very high heel. So I'd spent quite a bit of money on these running shoes, and because of the discomfort with my Achilles, the first thing I had to do was take a Stanley knife to the heels and split down them to divide it so that it wouldn't create a chaffing on my Achilles. But I ran my first London Marathon in those. I remember there's a wedge of foam. But generally speaking, people didn't have dedicated sporting kit for the people who were just running more generally in the locality. But running took off, and although I didn't do any more serious running for 25 years before I came back, and shortly afterwards joined the club, when I came back I was just astonished at the range of choice. From you can buy shoes if you pronate, overpronate, underpronate, or neutral, or whatever else, and compared with pure DAPS, which were straight off the shelf in the old days, it's a benefit.
So how do you think today's kit compares to the early equipment that you used?
Well, as I said, it's just, in terms of the quality, there's no comparison whatsoever. I would say that when I started running and playing in sport generally, there was some dedicated kit, but most of what we wore was stuff that you could also wear out and about, and you didn't have material that would wick away perspiration and things like that. That was, as far as I was concerned, unheard of. Dedicated shoes for different events, different activities, different sports. again, most people could afford to buy one pair of something they would wear for every type of sport they did, whether it was playing 5-a-side football or running in cross country. It was the same sort of thing, generally speaking. So the ability to have something very specific is hugely beneficial, I suggest. And our club itself has recently gone into buying more specific equipment to make it more suitable for the different events that our athletes participate in.
Okay, thanks Bernie for answering these questions.